The billionaire's mansion stood on the hill like a symbol of perfection, a shining example of wealth and success. From the outside, everything seemed flawless. The gardens were immaculately trimmed, the walls gleamed with freshly polished marble, and expensive cars lined the driveway. People passing by would often whisper to each other, admiring the lifestyle of a family that seemed to have everything anyone could ever dream of. But inside the walls of that grand house, appearances were carefully maintained, like a perfectly painted portrait that hid cracks beneath the surface. The billionaire himself was admired and envied by many. Tall, confident, and commanding, he carried himself with the aura of someone who had earned every bit of his wealth through intelligence and hard work. He was generous with charity donations, invited prominent guests to his home, and appeared to be the perfect father, always doting on his family. To the outside world, his life seemed flawless. But the truth was that perfection was a mask, carefully crafted to hide the real story of what went on behind closed doors. His wife, equally elegant and poised, complemented his image perfectly. She moved with grace, always impeccably dressed, always polite, always smiling in public. Her social media was filled with pictures of her family vacations, charity events, and luxury parties, making everyone believe she had the perfect life. Friends and neighbors admired her dedication to her daughter, often commenting on how loving and patient she was. But behind her warm smiles and gentle gestures, she had her own secrets, carefully hidden from the world, even from her husband at times. The daughter, the center of everyone's attention, was believed to be blind. People often felt a mix of sympathy and admiration for her. She was polite, quiet, and always well-behaved, never complaining about anything. Every charity event, social gathering, or media appearance seemed to highlight her struggles in a way that made the family even more admired. The public saw a story of resilience, courage, and love, thinking that the billionaire and his wife were selfless parents dedicated to supporting their daughter in every possible way. Inside the house, however, things were not exactly as they seemed. The daughter was bright, curious, and very aware of her surroundings, more aware than anyone could imagine. She asked questions quietly, observed everything, and noticed details that even her parents missed. The walls of the mansion were filled with whispers, secrets, and a silent tension that no outsider could detect. Guests who visited often left with the impression of a happy, perfect family, never suspecting the complicated dynamics that existed behind the carefully arranged furniture and flawless smiles. The household ran like a well-oiled machine, but every detail was carefully controlled. Every guest visit, every media interview, every family photograph was orchestrated to maintain the image of perfection. The billionaire focused on the business and social image, believing that his family shared the same priorities. The wife, on the other hand, had her own methods of keeping things under control, deciding what was revealed and what remained hidden. The daughter, though seemingly innocent, quietly observed the patterns, noticing both the control and the secrets, though she never revealed her thoughts. Despite the wealth, the beauty, and the admiration of others, there was a quiet tension under the surface. Conversations were carefully measured, smiles were carefully practiced, and the truth was carefully hidden. Each family member played their role, aware that the image of perfection depended on their performance. The mansion was more than a home, it was a stage, and the family were actors in a play where the audience believed everything was real. This facade of perfection created a sense of mystery. Outsiders could not imagine the complexities beneath the polished surface. The billionaire thought he understood his family perfectly, never imagining that behind the smiles and the public appearances, there were truths that could shatter everything he believed. The wife knew how to maintain control, how to guide perception, and how to keep her secrets well hidden. And the daughter, though underestimated, quietly learned to navigate the world around her, aware of the delicate balance that kept the perfect image intact. In this household of wealth, admiration, and appearances, life went on like a carefully edited story, every day performed for the world to see. But as in any story, appearances can be deceiving, and the cracks hidden beneath the surface were only waiting for someone perceptive enough to notice them. That someone would arrive soon, and the delicate illusion of perfection would be challenged in ways no one expected, starting a chain of events that could reveal the truths carefully concealed within the walls of the grand mansion. The boy arrived at the billionaire's mansion one bright morning, carrying a quiet confidence that seemed far beyond his years. No one knew exactly why he was there. Some said he was a distant relative, others claimed he was sent by a family friend, but the truth was, his arrival would change everything. Unlike the usual guests, who were either impressed or intimidated by the grandeur of the estate, the boy seemed almost indifferent to the opulence around him. He didn't stare at the golden chandeliers or the priceless artwork. Instead, his eyes were always observant, constantly scanning, noting details that most adults would overlook. From the very first moment, he noticed subtle things that didn't fit the perfect image everyone else believed. The daughter, who was thought to be blind, moved with a precision and awareness that seemed unusual. She would react to sounds before anyone else noticed them or seemed to know where objects were without being guided. Yet, when adults complimented her or adjusted her surroundings, she remained calm and polite, never revealing her sharp perception. The boy found this fascinating. Something about her behavior didn't align with the story the family told the world, and it piqued his curiosity. He observed the wife closely, too. Her smiles were warm, her gestures gentle, but there was a controlled precision in everything she did. How she interacted with the daughter, how she arranged the furniture, how she directed conversations during meals, it all seemed rehearsed. The boy could sense that she was protecting something, keeping the family's secrets carefully hidden behind that elegant exterior. There was an almost invisible tension in the air, a silent game being played that only someone truly attentive could notice. Even the billionaire, the father, seemed unaware of the subtle anomalies around him. He was absorbed in his work, his business empire, and his public image. He believed that his wife and daughter were exactly what he thought they were, that his family's life was as flawless as it appeared. The boy, however, could see past the illusion. He noticed how the daughter's eyes seemed to follow movements in the room, how small sounds triggered reactions that suggested she was far more aware than anyone realized. And most intriguing of all, he sensed that the mother was intentionally controlling what the father and the world saw. The boy didn't rush to speak. He was patient, knowing that sudden questions might alert the family or make them defensive. Instead, he began to quietly gather clues, noticing patterns and inconsistencies in daily routines. He paid attention to small gestures, the way the mother's hand would subtly guide the daughter, the careful positioning of objects, even the choice of words when discussing certain topics. Slowly, he began to piece together a story that contradicted everything the world believed about this seemingly perfect family. Despite his young age, the boy had a sharp mind and an instinct for truth. He understood that appearances could be deceiving, and that sometimes, the most powerful secrets were hidden in plain sight. He started spending more time with the daughter, observing her behavior, asking casual questions, and subtly testing her reactions. He wasn't cruel or intrusive, he simply wanted to understand the reality behind the carefully crafted facade. What he discovered both shocked and intrigued him. This girl, who everyone thought needed protection, was far more capable and aware than anyone imagined. But what fascinated him even more was the delicate balance that maintained the family's image. Every day, the mother orchestrated a silent performance, ensuring that the world saw only what she wanted. The daughter played her part perfectly, and the father, confident in his perception, remained unaware of the truth. It was a complex dance of control, deception, and appearances, and the boy realized that if he revealed the truth too soon, it could shatter not just the family's image, but the fragile relationships that held them together. And so, he watched, he waited, and he learned. Every interaction, every glance, every carefully curated moment in the mansion became a piece of the puzzle. He knew that one day, the truth would have to be confronted, and he needed to be ready for that moment. But for now, he remained a quiet observer, a young detective in a world of wealth, power, and secrets. The mansion, with all its beauty and perfection, had become a place of mystery for him, a stage where the most unexpected revelations were waiting to unfold, and he was determined to uncover them all, one subtle clue at a time. As days passed, the boy's quiet observations began to turn into suspicion. He had seen enough to know that something about this family was not as it appeared. The daughter, bright and unusually aware, moved with precision that no blind child should possess. She would reach for objects before anyone placed them, react to subtle changes in the environment, and sometimes, just sometimes, catch glimpses of things her parents believed she couldn't see. Every time this happened, the mother's careful control came into play, an almost imperceptible gesture, a guiding hand, a softly spoken word, that kept the illusion intact. But the boy noticed. He could see it, and slowly, a pattern emerged in his mind. He began to pay closer attention to the mother, who seemed like the queen of subtle manipulations. She controlled everything, the daughter's movements, her interactions, even the narrative she presented to the father and outsiders. At first, it seemed like simple overprotectiveness, but the boy quickly realized it was far more calculated. It wasn't just protection, it was control, deliberate and precise. Every time someone praised the daughter's supposed bravery in coping with blindness, the mother would subtly steer the conversation, ensuring no one noticed the child's true awareness. The boy's curiosity grew. What was she hiding, and why? The billionaire, busy with business and appearances, remained oblivious. He trusted his wife completely, believing that the family was perfect in its imperfections. He had no reason to doubt her, no reason to question the reality he had been shown. The boy, however, did not rely on assumptions or appearances. He quietly observed interactions at meals, during play, and even in casual conversations. He noticed the daughter's quick reactions to things her father thought she couldn't perceive. He saw the subtle signals from the mother that masked the truth. Little by little, pieces of a puzzle began to form, and the picture that emerged was far more complex than anyone could imagine. The boy's first intentional test came one afternoon when the daughter was playing near the grand staircase. He casually placed a small object on the floor where he assumed she couldn't see it. Within seconds, she moved toward it, picking it up before he could reach her. He didn't make a scene, he simply noted the reaction in his mind. The pattern repeated itself over the next several days, small tests, subtle observations, each confirming what he had begun to suspect. The daughter was not blind. The realization hit him with a mixture of shock and excitement. He was witnessing something extraordinary, a truth carefully hidden behind layers of manipulation. The boy's discovery also made him aware of the stakes involved. This was not a simple household secret, it was a carefully maintained illusion, one that had shaped how the father viewed his daughter, how the mother controlled her image, and how the world perceived the family. Any misstep, any hint of the truth, could shatter the carefully crafted perfection that everyone admired. Yet, he knew that ignoring it was impossible. Something had to be done, but he needed more evidence, more understanding, before confronting anyone. As he continued his quiet investigation, the boy began to notice the emotional dynamics as well. The daughter, though aware and intelligent, seemed resigned to the roles assigned to her. She complied with her mother's guidance and played along with the false narrative, perhaps out of habit or loyalty. The mother's influence was profound, shaping not only perceptions but behaviors, ensuring that the truth remained invisible to outsiders. And the father, unaware of the delicate manipulations at play, remained an unwitting participant in the charade. Each day, the boy's suspicions grew stronger, fueled by observations and patterns he couldn't ignore. He began connecting events, words, and gestures, uncovering the subtle ways the mother maintained her control. He realized that this was more than overprotectiveness, it was a deliberate act, a choice to shape reality according to her design. The mansion, with all its grandeur and perfection, now felt like a stage where the boy was the only one seeing behind the scenes, the only one noticing the hidden script. By the end of the week, the boy had gathered enough subtle proof to feel certain of what he suspected. The daughter was not blind, and the mother was intentionally orchestrating a performance. But he also understood that revealing this truth would not be simple. It would require courage, precision, and timing. For now, he continued to watch, silently piecing together the secrets that had been hidden for so long, preparing for the day when the truth could no longer be concealed. The mansion, with all its beauty and deception, had become a labyrinth of secrets, and the boy was determined to navigate it carefully, uncovering the hidden realities that everyone else refused to see. The moment finally arrived when the boy could no longer stay silent. Days of observing, noting patterns, and quietly testing the daughter's awareness had built into a certainty he could not ignore. He knew the truth: her blindness was a carefully constructed illusion orchestrated by her mother, but revealing it would not be easy. The stakes were high. One wrong word, one misstep, and the delicate balance of the family's life could collapse. Yet the boy felt a strange mixture of duty and courage, understanding that honesty sometimes required risk, especially when deception had become so deeply rooted. He chose the afternoon when the billionaire was in his private study, reviewing papers and conducting calls, to speak. The house was quiet, almost eerily so, as if it knew something significant was about to happen. The boy found the billionaire seated at his polished oak desk, his posture straight, his attention absorbed in numbers and documents that reflected the empire he had built. For a moment, the boy hesitated, studying the man who appeared so commanding, so unshakable. Could he really deliver the truth? He took a deep breath and began. "Sir," the boy said calmly, but with a firmness that immediately drew the billionaire's attention, "I need to tell you something about your daughter." The billionaire looked up, surprised. His brow furrowed slightly, curiosity mixing with mild concern. "Go on," he said, his voice steady but questioning, expecting perhaps some trivial observation. He did not yet sense the gravity of what was coming. The boy spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. "Your daughter, she isn't blind. I've seen it. She notices things, reacts to movements, and follows what happens around her. And, it's your wife, she's controlling what everyone sees." For a moment, the billionaire's face froze. Confusion, disbelief, and shock flashed across his features. His mind tried to reject the idea, rationalize it, convince him that the boy must be mistaken. After all, he had trusted his wife completely for years. She had always been elegant, graceful, and devoted, or so he had believed. Could she really have been deceiving him all this time? "Are you saying, she's lying?" About everything?" the billionaire finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper, disbelief coloring each word. "Yes," the boy said firmly. "She wants the world to believe your daughter is blind. I've seen how she guides her, how she controls the image you see. It's deliberate, and it's been going on for a long time." The billionaire leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. His mind raced, trying to piece together all the little inconsistencies he had brushed off over the years, the subtle reactions, the things he had assumed were normal, the unusual precision of his daughter's movements. He had trusted what he saw, and now that trust seemed to crumble before him. Why would she do this?" he asked finally, his voice tinged with anger, confusion, and a hint of fear. The boy shook his head slightly, acknowledging that he didn't know the full motives, but he knew enough to understand that control and secrecy were at the heart of it. "I don't know why," he admitted. "But the truth is here, and you need to see it for yourself. You can't ignore it anymore." The billionaire sat in silence for several long moments, his mind a storm of thoughts and emotions. Anger burned quietly at the betrayal, fear for the daughter's well-being mixed with guilt for never noticing sooner, and disbelief clashed with the undeniable proof the boy had presented. Slowly, a realization settled in: he could no longer trust appearances, no longer assume that everything he had believed about his family was true. The illusion had begun to crack, and he had to face it, no matter how painful it might be. Finally, he nodded slowly, signaling that the boy should continue observing, but also that he would take the next steps himself. "Show me," he said, his voice low but resolute. "I need to see this with my own eyes." The boy's heart raced, knowing that the confrontation had begun in earnest. This was only the first step, the initial unveiling of a carefully hidden truth. The mansion, once a symbol of perfection, now felt like a stage where masks were falling, revealing the real emotions, the real secrets, and the real dynamics hidden behind elegant smiles. And somewhere in the house, the mother continued her carefully orchestrated performance, unaware that the first cracks in her deception were beginning to show. A confrontation had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The boy had started a chain of events that would expose hidden truths, force the family to face reality, and change their lives forever. The billionaire sat back in his chair, the weight of the boy's words pressing down on him like a storm he hadn't expected. He stared at the polished floor, at the pristine walls, at the luxurious mansion he had always believed was a sanctuary of perfection. And yet, for the first time, that perfect image seemed fragile, hollow, and easily shattered. His mind refused to accept the possibility. Denial surged inside him, like a wave he could not fight. This couldn't be true, not his wife, not his daughter, not the carefully constructed life he had cherished. He shook his head, trying to dismiss the boy's words as a misunderstanding. "No," he said firmly, his voice steady but carrying a tremor of disbelief, "this isn't possible. My daughter, she has always been blind. Everything she has experienced, everything we've taught her, it's real. You must be mistaken." The boy looked at him steadily, knowing that simple words would not be enough to break through the layers of denial. "I'm not mistaken," he said calmly. "I've watched her, observed her reactions. I've seen how she notices things before anyone else, how she reacts to movements, how your wife controls what you see. She isn't blind, and your wife has been guiding the narrative all this time." The billionaire's eyes widened in disbelief, but still, he resisted the truth. His mind searched for any explanation that could make sense. Perhaps the boy had misinterpreted something, perhaps it was a trick, a misunderstanding, something that could be explained away. But the more he thought about it, the more inconsistencies began to surface in his memory. Little details he had ignored, small reactions he had dismissed, subtle behaviors he had overlooked, all began to line up with what the boy was saying. Anger rose inside him, sharp and bitter. How could his wife do this? How could she deceive him for so long, manipulating not only him but everyone around them? The betrayal cut deeper than he had imagined, striking at the core of the trust he had placed in his family. Yet, even in the anger, the billionaire clung to denial. He didn't want to believe it, believing it meant acknowledging that the life he thought was perfect had been built on lies. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice now shaking slightly, a mix of fear and disbelief. "Are you really saying that everything I've believed, everything I've trusted, is wrong?" "Yes," the boy replied firmly, but not aggressively. "I've seen it. The truth is there, and hiding it won't make it disappear. Your daughter isn't blind, and your wife has been controlling how everything appears to you. You need to see it yourself." The billionaire ran his hands over his face, pressing his fingers against his temples. He wanted to believe otherwise, to hold on to the illusion that everything was as it seemed. But deep down, he knew that he could not ignore the clues forever. The mansion, the family, the carefully curated appearances, all of it suddenly felt fragile. For years, he had relied on the image of perfection, on the trust he had placed in his wife, on the belief that his daughter needed his protection. And now, every belief was being challenged. Despite the denial raging within him, there was also a flicker of curiosity, a spark that could not be extinguished. He wanted to understand, to see for himself, to confront the truth directly. The idea terrified him, but it also called to something deeper, the need to face reality, no matter how painful it might be. He realized that avoiding the truth would only prolong the deception and make the eventual revelation even more devastating. Finally, after a long silence, he nodded slowly. "Show me," he said, his voice low but firm, a mixture of fear, anger, and determination. "I need to see this for myself. I need to understand what has been happening under my roof for all these years." The boy's eyes brightened slightly. The first step had been taken. The confrontation had begun, piercing through the billionaire's denial and forcing him to face a reality he had long refused to accept. It was only the beginning, the first crack in the carefully constructed facade, but it was a start. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and perfection, now felt like a fragile stage, where illusions could no longer hide the truth. And somewhere in the house, the mother continued her careful performance, unaware that her deception was slowly unraveling. The billionaire's denial would not disappear overnight. It would take time, evidence, and undeniable proof for him to fully accept the reality before him. But the seeds of awareness had been planted, and the boy had lit the first spark of truth. The confrontation was underway, and there was no turning back. The truth, once hinted at, could no longer stay hidden. The boy had pierced the veil of illusion, and now the billionaire's mind churned with questions, anger, and confusion. Why had his wife kept this secret? Why had she allowed deception to shape not only their daughter's life but his own perception of reality? The answers were unclear, and yet the boy, patient and observant, knew that motives often revealed themselves in small, subtle ways. He began to pay closer attention to the mother, watching not just her actions but the reasons behind them. The mother's demeanor remained impeccable in public, her smile unwavering, her gestures flawless. But behind closed doors, a different story emerged, one that only someone truly perceptive could notice. She spoke carefully, measured her words, and guided every interaction with precision. Nothing was accidental. Every detail, every choice, every carefully controlled moment served a purpose. The boy began to see that her control over the daughter's blindness was not merely for appearances, it was for power, for influence, and, perhaps most importantly, for safety. It became clear that the mother had her reasons, though they were tangled with fear, ambition, and an unyielding need for control. The daughter, while outwardly compliant, was bright, perceptive, and capable, a fact that could have been dangerous if revealed to the world. By controlling the narrative, the mother maintained not just the family's image, but also her own influence within the household. She carefully orchestrated every moment to protect herself from scrutiny, ensuring that the father's trust remained intact and that outsiders remained unaware of the family's real dynamics. The boy noticed patterns in the mother's behavior that explained years of small, subtle manipulations. She would adjust the daughter's position in a room before the father entered, gently correct her actions without anyone noticing, and skillfully deflect questions from guests or staff. Each action reinforced the illusion that the daughter was blind, creating a controlled environment in which the mother held the invisible strings. The boy realized that she had become the guardian not only of appearances but also of power within the household, a role no one had questioned, until now. Yet, beneath the control, there were hints of fear. The boy saw it in fleeting moments, a pause too long, a glance over the shoulder, a hesitation before speaking. It was the fear of exposure, the fear that the truth might slip through and shatter the delicate balance she had maintained for years. He understood that this was not just deception, it was self-preservation. She had convinced herself that the ends justified the means, that keeping the daughter's awareness a secret was necessary to protect both the child and the family. The boy began to piece together a clearer picture. The mother's motives were complex, a mixture of protection, ambition, and control. She wanted to preserve the family's image, maintain her authority, and prevent chaos. But in doing so, she had trapped everyone in a web of illusion. The daughter had learned to play along, silently navigating the carefully curated reality, while the father remained unaware, convinced of the perfection he had always believed in. As the boy continued to observe, he also noticed cracks in the mother's carefully maintained persona. Small frustrations, subtle slips, and rare moments of anger hinted at the burden of maintaining the illusion. It was exhausting, isolating, and fragile, a house of cards that could collapse with the slightest disturbance. The boy understood that the confrontation with the father had already begun to disturb that balance. The mother's carefully constructed motives, once invisible, were now being questioned and slowly exposed. By the end of his observations, the boy felt he finally understood the mother, not just as the orchestrator of the illusion, but as a woman driven by fear, ambition, and love in her own complicated way. Her actions, while deceptive, were motivated by a desire to control outcomes, protect appearances, and safeguard her child. Yet, he also understood that protecting the truth had come at a cost, the father's trust, the daughter's autonomy, and the integrity of the family itself. The mansion, which had once seemed like a stage for perfection, was now revealed as a complex web of intentions, motivations, and secrets. Every smile, every gesture, every carefully curated moment had a deeper meaning, a hidden purpose. The boy knew that understanding the mother's motive was only the first step. Confronting her, exposing the truth, and resolving the tangled web of deception would require courage, strategy, and careful timing. For the first time, the boy felt the weight of responsibility. He was no longer just an observer. He was the one who had glimpsed the hidden reality, the one who would decide how and when the truth would emerge. The mother's motive had been uncovered, complex and layered, but now the challenge was clear. The delicate balance of the family had to be addressed, and the consequences of revelation could change everything. The moment the truth began to surface, the mansion, once a symbol of wealth and perfection, became a storm of emotions. The billionaire could no longer hide behind denial. His mind raced with anger, betrayal, and confusion as the boy's revelations sank in. The daughter, the child he had always believed to be helpless, was not blind. His wife, the woman he had trusted completely, had been orchestrating a carefully constructed illusion for years. The revelation struck him like a physical blow, leaving him reeling and unsure where to turn. At first, the billionaire wanted to lash out, to demand explanations, to punish what he saw as deceit. But beneath the anger, there was also fear, fear for his daughter, fear for the life he had built, and fear of facing a reality that shattered his understanding of his family. He paced the grand halls, his mind spinning, replaying memories in a new, disturbing light. Moments that had seemed ordinary now carried a hidden significance. Every gesture, every word, every carefully guided interaction was part of a narrative he had never truly understood. The daughter, meanwhile, was caught in a whirlwind of her own emotions. She had long played the role her mother assigned, concealing her awareness and adapting to the carefully orchestrated environment. Now, with the truth on the brink of exposure, she felt a mixture of relief, fear, and uncertainty. Relief, because the secrecy no longer had to be maintained in her mind alone. Fear, because the confrontation threatened the stability she had relied on. And uncertainty, because she did not yet know how her father would react once he fully grasped the truth. The mother, sensing the shift, felt panic creeping in. Her carefully maintained control was slipping. Every subtle gesture she had relied on to maintain the illusion now seemed fragile and inadequate. She realized that the father's growing awareness, fueled by the boy's observations, could unravel the narrative she had spent years constructing. The realization was terrifying. The web of deception that had protected her power, image, and the supposed welfare of the family was beginning to collapse. Tension filled the house like a tangible force. Conversations that once flowed smoothly now stumbled under the weight of suspicion and disbelief. Silence hung in rooms that had always been filled with polite laughter and careful smiles. Every glance, every word, every interaction was now charged with suspicion. The billionaire struggled to reconcile his love for his wife with the betrayal he now felt. He questioned every memory, every decision, every belief he had held for years. Could he ever trust her again? Could he even trust the life he had built? The boy, still observing, recognized the delicate and dangerous nature of the emotional fallout. He had anticipated the initial shock, but the depth of the reaction surprised even him. He understood that the confrontation had begun, but the real challenge lay in how the family would navigate the coming days. Emotions were raw, trust was shattered, and relationships that had seemed stable were now fragile and unpredictable. Amidst the tension, there were fleeting moments of clarity. The daughter, despite her fear, began to speak honestly to the boy, sharing small truths she had long concealed. The billionaire, though hurt and disoriented, started to see patterns he had ignored for years. And the mother, while desperate to maintain control, could no longer fully hide the fear and guilt that had fueled her actions. These moments, though brief, hinted at the possibility of understanding, dialogue, and perhaps, eventual reconciliation. The emotional fallout was not just about anger or betrayal, it was about understanding the complexity of human motives, the fragility of trust, and the consequences of deception. Each family member was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and each other. The billionaire had to face the reality that appearances can be deceiving. The daughter had to navigate a world where her awareness was finally acknowledged. The mother had to reconcile the consequences of her actions with the love and fear that had driven her decisions. By the end of the day, the mansion felt different, heavier, charged with unspoken truths, and alive with tension. The carefully crafted facade of perfection had been irrevocably broken, replaced by raw, complicated emotions that no wealth or influence could mask. The family now faced a new reality, one in which honesty, courage, and understanding would determine whether they could survive the storm they had unwittingly created. The emotional fallout had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The house, once a stage for illusion and control, had finally settled into a fragile calm. The storm of revelation, confrontation, and emotional upheaval had passed, leaving the family to face the reality of their lives. The billionaire, once consumed by denial and anger, now sat quietly in his study, reflecting on everything he had learned. The mansion's walls, which had seemed to symbolize perfection, now felt like silent witnesses to the truths that had been hidden for years. He understood, more clearly than ever, that wealth and appearances meant nothing when trust was broken and reality was ignored. The daughter, who had spent years navigating a carefully constructed illusion, finally felt a sense of freedom. She no longer needed to play a role, to hide her awareness, or to live within the boundaries her mother had set. For the first time, she could simply be herself, bright, observant, and alive in ways she had been forced to conceal. Her eyes, once believed blind, now reflected a clarity that could not be hidden. There was relief in that freedom, but also a quiet trepidation. The family had been shaken to its core, and the path forward would require patience, understanding, and courage. The mother, too, faced the consequences of her actions. Her careful control, her elaborate orchestration, and her hidden motives had been exposed, leaving her to reckon with the pain and confusion she had caused. She realized that her attempts to protect and guide had crossed a line, shaping reality in ways that betrayed trust and manipulated perceptions. Yet, in her reflection, there was also a flicker of understanding. Her actions, however misguided, had been driven by love and fear. She had sought to preserve her family, but the lesson was now clear: control could never replace honesty, and manipulation could never create lasting safety. In the days that followed, the family began the slow process of rebuilding. Conversations that had been avoided for years now became honest and deliberate. The billionaire listened to the daughter, acknowledging her experiences, her observations, and her perspective. He also spoke to his wife, seeking understanding, forgiveness, and clarity about the choices she had made. It was not an easy process. The trust that had been broken could not be restored overnight. But the willingness to confront the truth, to face discomfort, and to speak openly marked the first steps toward healing. The boy, who had been the catalyst for change, quietly observed from the sidelines. His role had been vital. He had seen through the illusion, spoken the truth, and sparked a confrontation that no one else had dared to initiate. Yet, he did not seek recognition or praise. He understood that change was never about credit but about courage, awareness, and the willingness to act. The family's journey toward understanding and reconciliation had begun, and he knew that their choices now would shape the future. As time passed, the mansion gradually transformed from a place of secrecy and tension into a space of honesty and reflection. The family learned to navigate relationships without masks, to address conflicts with openness, and to value trust above appearances. The lessons were profound. Wealth could not protect them from deception, perfection could not hide human flaws, and love required courage, patience, and truth. In the end, the experience reshaped them all. The billionaire came to understand the fragility of perception and the importance of truly knowing those closest to him. The daughter embraced her identity and awareness, confident that she could navigate the world honestly. The mother, humbled by the consequences of control, learned that protection required respect and transparency, not manipulation. And the boy, having fulfilled his role as observer and catalyst, left the household with a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that truth had finally begun to prevail. The mansion, which had once been a symbol of wealth and perfection, now stood as a reminder of human complexity, resilience, and the power of honesty. Illusions had been broken, secrets revealed, and emotions confronted, leaving the family forever changed. Life would never return to the carefully curated performances of the past, but it could move forward with authenticity, courage, and understanding. In the end, the story of deception, discovery, and revelation became a testament to the enduring strength of truth and the transformative power of facing reality, no matter how difficult the journey.